Another round of fighting internet nonsense. This one is on the economy. So this is a one of two part series. We're going to kind of go on some historical performance by party in all matters economics. Got a lot to cover today. This one might be a little longer, but I'll try and keep it short. We're going to cover GDP, which is the economy, national debt, job growth, S&P 500, which is the stock market, real wages, inflation, and manufacturing investment. All right, we're going to start off with the big one. This is GDP or gross domestic product. This is the best kind of general metric they use for the economy, translates well across countries. Its individual components are private consumption, government expenditure, investment, exports minus imports. Um, so if we look at these graphs, Trump, the GDP growth was 1.4%, which is not too great. If you exclude COVID, 2.6%. Biden was 3.4% as of a couple months ago. If you exclude COVID, it's 3.6%. So advantage clear to Biden and the overall economy, even if you exclude COVID. So these numbers are real. That's an important concept. We're going to see that later. And real means you take out inflation. So if the nominal growth is 6%, but there was inflation of 3%, your real GDP growth is that remaining 3%. A pretty common metric for them wages, a whole bunch of other things. All right, let's talk debt and deficit. This one might surprise you a little bit. So some quick terminology. The deficit is that gap in spending over revenue. So if you have a monthly deficit in your house of $100 over 10 months, you'll have a debt of $1,000. So some interesting things here. Increased slightly under Reagan and Bush. Clinton, it got better and actually ran a surplus. George Bush inherited that surplus and then did the big George Bush tax cuts, and tax cuts for rich people is not good in economic policy. So that exacerbated the debt and deficit under his term, and then there was the financial crisis at the end of his term, and Obama inherited that. So pretty big deficits under Obama, but those were slowly going away. Deficits actually increased under Trump. Again, the tax cuts for rich people was not good economic policy, and so that was increasing during the first couple of years of his term, and then COVID just exploded it, and Biden is cleaning up that mess. But again, still a really big deal. If you look at government spending, the vast majority of government spending is for kind of like social service. Our disposable spending is mostly the military. You can all look all this stuff up, but pretty interesting stuff. All right, job creation. This one's pretty interesting too. So definitely favors the Democrats. Since 1989, 1.3 million jobs were created under Republican presidents and 49.4 million jobs under Democratic presidents. So 97% of all the jobs since 1989 come under Democratic presidents. Now, the stat's a little misleading. 1989 just makes the stat look bigger. But if you go back to let's say 1977, which is a graphic here, so that's all the way back, the same number of years of presidencies for Republican, Democrat. It's still overwhelmingly Democrat, with 60 million for Democrats and 17 for Republicans. There's actually a really good article in from The Economist that I have the link included there. But check that out. Yeah, job growth, absolutely dynamite under Democratic presidents and has been for decades. Pretty meager under Republican presidents. All right, on to stock market performance. So short version here is done pretty well both under both presidents. In Trump, it started in like if you use stocks forward looking, so you do November 2017. It was at 2269, ended up getting about 33%, 32% higher by the end of by this time in his term. So 32% gain, that's pretty good. A long time period stock market about 8% a year. Now, Biden, it went from 3,600 to almost 5,900, and we're currently keep bouncing off all-time highs. So that's a 62% increase. So advantage Biden on the stock market. Stock market, not a, it's a decent representation of the economy, but it leads off a lot of sectors. It's way too overweight in tech, and underweight in things like schools, police, like state funding and stuff like that. But it's an okay gauge. But kind of the story here is the economy is doing well, and if someone tells you the economy is not doing well, they're lying to you, like straight up. So this is another good graph. So this is wages. So we kind of like did some high level stuff. What's happening to like the average guy? So this is median wage. So again, I made the joke that me and Betsy DeVos have 5 yachts on average. because I have 0 yachts and she has 10. But the median is like that person in the middle. It's not an statistical average person. It's literally the person in the middle. So median wage growth has been increasing since basically middle of the Obama. There was a spike in 2020 because of low earners dropping out of the sample, but it's basically gone up since kind of like the middle of the Obama, which is really good. We'll look up some other metrics by decile and see like lower income earners actually did really, really well the last couple of years. But so again, this is real metrics. So um, if wages are up by 15%, inflation's up by 10%, that means you get a 5% gap, 5% real increase. So this is really good. It's really good to see the median wages up like this. So just to give an example to really drive this home, um, let's say you make $80,000 a year and you get a job offer for 110. However, the healthcare plan stinks. You got to pay an extra 10K more. You take the job, and like the answer is yes, you're gonna be 20K per year better off. So that's kind of like the story of the economy over the last couple of years. Inflation's been higher, but wage inflation has been historically well high over the last couple of decades. Um, but wages have outpaced that. So we didn't get the stagflation. Like we've had a really strong labor market and wages have outpaced that. You know, economy's good, stock market's good. So despite the high inflation, wages have done even better. Again, just to really drive this home, the graph on the left is the real earnings after inflation by, decile. So the furthest on the left is your lowest wage earners, people working at McDonald's. They actually had the best real wage growth over the last couple of years, and it's kind of gone down. So this is, a result of the policies and the super tight labor market that we've had over the last couple of years. Um, haven't heard anything about raising the minimum wage. Like because that job market is so strong, people working those low end jobs are able to make a living. Is it easy? No, but they're doing a lot better than they were. And actually, over the last couple of years, uh, if you remember, I won on my video on inequality. That wealth and income gap, actually, a third of it was cut in the last couple of years under the Biden administration. So huge gains for the lowest earners. Um, Bottom graph here is the number of hours worked to get a week's worth of groceries. So there was a spike, but that's come down, and it's actually lower than it was 10 years ago. So good news there too. So getting back to that story of inflation, definitely a big problem, but it was a global problem. It wasn't isolated to the United States. The U.S. policy was more aggressive than our peer group countries. So that's fiscal policy, which is government spending and like giving checks to people, as well as our monetary policy was pretty aggressive. So like just flush the system with cash to try and get through the pandemic. So we did get more inflation early, but it's also come down a lot recently. So that's the higher interest rates, which are really affecting the housing and auto markets right now. But overall inflation is basically down. Um, you know, Joe Biden did not cause inflation in Italy. He did not cause inflation in Japan and Canada and the UK. So like this is a global problem. The United States had more inflation early. Inflation doesn't go away, but the rate of price increases is definitely under control right now. Yeah. And so my company does our own internal inflation calculations. And last month our inflation was zero. We had no inflation. So it's in pretty good shape right now. So we inflation's whipped and we've outperformed our peer groups. Also, the U.S. economy is beating its own expectations. So every year, like the Congressional Budget Office does projections on GDP, and we were actually beating the expectations in 2019. So before the pandemic, we thought we were going to be here, and we ended up even higher. So that's that graph on the left. The yellow line is the before pandemic, and the dark blue is what actually happened. So we're actually beating our economic projections, including inflation. So like taking all the inflation, including all that bad news, we're actually beating it still what we thought several years ago. So that's again great news. I kind of want to drive home some of the policy implications of what happened is like um, there have been massive investments. I'm sure you've seen all the cat bulldozers and stuff doing highways and doing building new factories and what like that's real. There's an absolute surge in manufacturing investment that's caused by a couple things. Um, One, infrastructure bill, two, the CHIPS Act. So that's the onshoring of like semiconductors, which are a lot of times are made in China, Taiwan, and Asia. So those are good tech jobs. And it's also from a national security standpoint, all of the advanced weaponry of modern militaries like needs those semiconductors. We're insourcing all of that and making sure we have control of the supply of all those advanced semiconductors. So good for economics and national security. Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot that going on in the Inflation Reduction Act. Um, Covers energy, transportation, manufacturing, clean energy. You know, kind of funny story. The U.S. oil production has actually outpaced Saudi Arabia last couple of years. Wouldn't expect it, but that's actually happened. Look that up. But the Inflation Reduction Act is also expected to reduce inflation over next 10 years based on CBA. However, short term it is kind of inflationary because like until you get the highway built, all the bulldozers and jobs rebuilding the highway is actually slowly inflationary. But net, good news. All right, got some conclusions. Thanks for making it to the end. Hopefully you learned something. Just want to drive a few of these points home. So GDP growth, really strong, envy of the world, doing really, really well. So that's a really good sign. If someone tells the economy is doing not doing great, they're wrong. Just go look it up. The data's out there. Again, job growth, really good. Historically, really, really good under Democratic presidents. If we have future Democratic presidents, it's probably going to be more of the same. So the next 4 years probably going to look like the current 4 years, which in my opinion, not bad. Stock market again, all-time highs, really good performance on both an absolute basis and a growth basis. So good news there. Inflation, real wages. Inflation definitely real problem happened. Though inflation is the rate of increase, so those prices are going to remain high, but wages have outpaced that. So people are making more money. So the cost of things hurt, but the wages have outpaced that. And so net, you're better. If you remember that example with the job. Infrastructure, so the IRA bill. So a lot of this stuff is finally starting to get like seeing the good news, seeing the economic impacts of a lot of that CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction, infrastructure bill, a lot of stuff that was passed in the last couple of years. And then lastly, it was like, oh, it's all debt. Um, Deficit reduction is better under Democratic presidency. Just look this up. It's just historically they've done better as far fiscally. So I hope you learned something, and there'll be more. So the next one is on the forward looking. So this is backward looking. Next one is going to be forward looking. What do the policy proposals of Trump and Harris look like? All right, thanks for watching.